but there's a notch coming down from that opening, from that mandibular foramen. That notch is there because during development of the mandible, a branch of the inferior alveolar is coming down there called the mylohyoid. And this will run down underneath the mylohyoid muscle, which is attached to this ridge here on the inside of the mandible, the mylohyoid ridge. Now, if we look at the underside of the mandible, this is the mandibular border out here. Here's the mylohyoid ridge or mylohyoid line in the front of the mandible. There are little bumps. These, I call them happy bumps, because their name are genial tubercles or genoid tubercles. And there is an upper tubercle and a lower tubercle. And those are holding on to the tongue, which is being held to the mandible, and to the hyoid bone, which is being held to the mandible. Okay, which we'll be seeing that a little bit later on, both from a lecture perspective and a laboratory perspective. Sometimes when you take a radiograph, I can see one of them here, sometimes between the two bumps on the radiograph of the mandibular anterior teeth, because the bumps are a little bit thicker than the space in between, you'll see a radiolucency, and sometimes that radiolucency, or this area of less dense bone, will make you think that maybe there's some type of an abscess going on if it happens to wind up adjacent to the apex of one of the mandibular teeth. So that's sometimes an anatomical artifact on a radiograph that you may see, either on a periapical or sometimes on a panorama. Okay. Let's look at this aspect. This is the skull cap, or the calaveria. And if we look at the calaveria, or even at other aspects of the skull, in particular the mandible, if we would make a sectional cut through it, we would see here a hard, dense, bony plate on the inside of the cranium, and a dense, bony plate on the outside of the cranium. But in between those two plates is cancellous bone, or trabecular bone, or spongy bone. That's what we refer to as a diploid. That's actually a marrow space. And early on in life, that marrow space is actually a red and white blood cell producer in the young child. So it does serve some, in particular, significance during early life. But that's called the diplo, the D-I-P-L-O umlauts over the E. It's a German word. Before we go into the skull, let's look at some of the bones disarticulated.